Hello and welcome to this special event video where we look at just what went wrong in episode 4 of the Kharos Stone adventures. Hello, my name is Guy, and by popular request this video is being made. You wanted it, so you get it. We're looking at, of course, what happened in episode 4 of the Kharos Stones. We were supposed to basically do an episode where the players learn more about the Kharos Stones from Donkey, who's now been named Scratchers, as a matter of fact. And the plan was fairly straightforward. They were to go to the Donkey's home city, they were to find that Balok has ransacked the home, and basically then they were to get some expert advice on everything that needed to go on. Let me move this over here and you'll be able to see it a bit better. And if I move over here, that'll be even better. So we had a plan. We had a great plan. And then you guys started to influence me, and influence me in a good way. Someone said, oh, I don't want Balok to die. Balok needs to have more of a presence. So I had that in the back of my mind. Then someone said, well, you know, what about the marriage? Are they now married between Vankus and the princess that was saved from the temple? And I went, oh, that's a good point. And then someone else said, well, if the donkey has all the information, then why do they even need to go to the library in the first place? And, you know, maybe the stone should lead the donkey there rather than it's being the donkey's old home. So I went, yes, that's a good point. So I incorporated a lot of that into the play. And look what happened. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It was a good thing. A lot of people said they enjoyed the show because we got to learn more about the characters. But we spent a good hour talking about the virtues of marriage. Now, this is where, when I look at the videos that I release on this channel and people go, oh, we never talk about that. We don't ever talk about that. We don't talk about that. You go, well, sometimes you do. And then you need to know how to handle them properly. So we had a derailment entirely of the story. I couldn't get it to move forward because there was these discussions going on. And I don't think that it was necessarily a bad thing upon reflection. Upon reflection, we looked at it and we went, okay, great. So this is the idea. We're going to get the donkey and we're going to get them to the city. We did do that. We did get them to the city. Ultimately, that's where they got to. But before then, we learned a whole lot of interesting things. Barnabas's very, very militant, very almost right-wing approach to religious dealings, but at the same time, a very logical plea. You can't just run around sacrificing people. The rest of the party against him on that one. Learning a bit more about the donkey, giving the donkey its name. Learning about Leslie, who was renamed because of a sponsorship that came through. That is, of course, something that you have to take into account. It's a live show, and it's got supporters and things, and rightly so. They want to include them. So Leslie is now the name of the princess, who's now married, or at least is thinking of being married to Vankus. I think the way that Dave played Vankus's reaction and his story about learning about his people. I had said that I wanted to do a character story. I didn't realize it was going to present itself in terms of his story. I think that's quite remarkable. And what it certainly has done now is we can now quite easily at any point in time travel to the Undersphere where we can meet we can't meet Old Wolf, who raised him. Old Wolf died. But we could meet up with that owlbear troop. And if I have those owlbears being poached or prosecuted, Vankus is going to be in there like a shot. And I bet you everybody else will follow along because they now know the story. So that's a wonderful emergent adventure. So remember when we were working out our adventure lists, we had 6 adventures that were left over. Well, now we've only got 5, and as a matter of fact, we've only got 4 because this one has become a 2-parter. I couldn't wrap it up in the 2.5 hours that we had. We just spent too much time with the wedding stuff for the adventure to finish out. It could have, but it would have been very, very rushed, and I didn't want to do that. And now that I've got that leniency, I can now play it out for longer anyway. So we haven't got through this whole thing. Balok escaped. Now, remember when we were doing the encounter design, I was talking about the fact that you can have a really powerful character, but if they're being beaten down upon by 5 PCs, they need to have a huge amount of hit points. And we saw in that opening volley how much damage Balok took. For me, it wasn't going to be satisfactory for Balok to die. it would have felt very empty. They would have gone, oh, that's the bastard from the tomb. Oh, he's dead. There was no payoff, none whatsoever. There was also comments from you guys saying, well, maybe Balok shouldn't die. That was the right call to make. That was definitely the right call to make, because look now what's happened. Now Jenks has died or nearly died multiple times. There was that whole rules query question thing. I'm still uncertain as to that final rule, and I don't really care about it either. If it's minus your entire constitution value or half your constitution value, it doesn't matter. I don't think she should have died there. I don't think that would have added any value whatsoever. We haven't got to know her character very much yet. We've seen a little bit of insight here or there, but she's still playing to that space that this very strange monk-like creature exists in. So they were reading up rules and stuff. We'd already made a call. We'd moved on. One of my house rules is if you've moved on the initiative track and something has rolled or someone has done something, you can't go back. So if the call was made, she didn't die, she didn't die. It's as easy as that. So we have this combat that was taking place. And I think you could see that the monsters, there was a lot of bad rolls on behalf of the monsters. The monsters are tough. They really are tough, and we're pushing them to the limit. And I didn't bring in that fire snake because once I had decided that Balok should survive, once I'd read your comments and went, yes, I agree with you, Balok should survive, I then determined, how do I get him out of there? And this is that seeding principle that I talked about. That silver rod with the 3 yellow gemstones in it. They didn't know what it did, and it vaguely had necrotic energy floating around it. Now, I decided, right, that is going to be the device that allows him to turn invisible, not to teleport away. That's too powerful, especially if the characters get hold of it. So I didn't want to overpower the characters by making it this really powerful device. So he turned invisible, and I managed to track him where he was on the map. There was at one point I asked Valentine to make a perception check because the hyena ran through Balok. And I wanted him to see whether he noticed that the hyena sort of bounced off of something and then carried on running. He failed his check. He didn't notice it. So Balok has now escaped. He's gone down the back passage of that building and has now fled. But he has left an indelible mark upon the characters. Jenks certainly should have an axe to grind with him. Once the rest of the ogres and the hyenas are dispatched with, that should cause an issue as well. And I'll leave that fire serpent. I haven't gotten rid of it completely. I'm going to leave it in the passageway in case the characters try and run after Balok. Balok has escaped. Now, the innkeeper, Al-Qasim, I don't even know where that name came from. It was just floating around in my head. I should also point out, by the way, that I thought I had lost this sheet behind me. When I started the session, I couldn't find it because I called it episode 4. But in my typing haste, I'd put a bracket before the name. So it wasn't coming up in order. Anyway, so I didn't have this with me, but because we'd worked it through, I kind of knew where we were supposed to go. So Al-Qasim, who now owns this bookstore, is going to survive. And he's not going to want the donkey back because the donkey is proving quite comical. People are enjoying the donkey. Scratches, I should say, is his name. So Donkey is going to be around. He's going to stay with the party. So Al-Qasim won't want him back. And that's because I think Donkey is going to eat his books and things. That's not a problem. What I think is important now is Al-Qasim can now reveal why Balok was in the library. And I think, personally, this makes for a much more interesting emergent adventure, which is going to help our plot. Now, again, this is why I say it's so important not to have planned out those plots beyond those sentences until we need to. Because Al-Qasim can now say to the party, Balok was here because Balok was looking for a book that speaks about the Kharos Stones. And that book is now going to be where our next adventure is. I threw out a seed, by the way, and you should have noticed that if you've been watching these videos by now. I threw out a seed where the Princess Leslie, as she's now called, Princess Leslie spoke about a treasure underneath a city somewhere else. And the players all kind of reacted going, oh, it's a subplot, it's a side quest, it's a temptation. Yes, it is. Yes, they noticed that it was a temptation. Do I care? No. Because in 7 or 8 adventures' time, they might go, well, remember there was that temple. Remember there was that thing. We could go there and we could try and get that. Anyway, that's a segue. Coming back, if Al-Qasim reveals that Balok was asking for a very specific book a book that has been lost to the Temple of Darkness in the Undersphere. That allows me to direct my players to go down to the Temple of the Undersphere. Point number one. Point number two, it gives us an easy and very clear route into Vankus's backstory. Very, very simple. We've got the owlbears that have been set up. We go to the Undersphere. There's the owlbears. They're under attack. Vankus gets involved. We get the book. I think that Balok at this point can be seen or can be related to our great big enemy Wakthroughs. I think that we can now introduce that nemesis again. He needs to get to that Temple of Darkness as well, and he needs to do something along those lines. That's my thinking. Anyway, bringing Wakthroughs into that mission, I'm not going to plot it out just yet. I want to see how this El-Qasim story plays out. It will obviously be the final combat with these creatures. I'm not sure. I don't think they're in any danger of dying. Most of them haven't been hit. It's just Jenks who unfortunately maneuvered herself into that very difficult situation. Here's an example where the tactical map, the battle map, has proven to be, I think, very detrimental to Jenks' character, but very advantageous to everybody else. Because there's a tactical map, of course, they can see where everybody is, and then I determine, well, the creature's right next to so-and-so that they're going to attack. With the hyenas were surrounding Draxus at one point, and it would have made sense for them to attack him directly. But because he's not a fighter, he is a sorcerer. That one hyena, I thought, you know what, he's been shot at by Valentine. Let me give him a wisdom saving throw. So I just made a quick wisdom saving throw. I don't even think it came up on the screen. But he failed his wisdom saving throw. So I determined that he was in a blood rage and that he was going to follow Vankus, giving Draxus that attack of opportunity so that there could be a little bit of damage maybe dealt to the creature. There wasn't in that case. And then, of course, the hyena attacks Valentine, who's got a higher armor class and who's got more hit points. So there was no effect. So I have been trying to manage as best I can where the creatures go based on some dice rolling so that it isn't just GM machinations trying to keep the party alive. There is some authenticity, I suppose, in their decision-making process. Now, we've obviously got this idea that Balok was going to escape in a hot air balloon if he wasn't going to die in that encounter. So he hasn't died. There is that hot air balloon, but we don't need the hot air balloon to be of value anymore. Although he escaped and has vanished into the city, the players will know where he's going because El-Qasim has been saved by being thrown into the alleyway. He has been saved, and so will reveal to the players this dark temple down below. Do I need to plan out that dark temple? Yes, absolutely I do. Do I have guarantee that that's where the players are going? No. Why? Because once they've saved El-Qasim, we know that Draxus is going to steal that chest. That chest is gone. So how much money is a bookkeeper going to have in that chest of his? I don't think he's going to have a lot, but I do think that he's going to have some items in there. He's going to have 1 or 2 magical items. The party hasn't really picked up any treasure yet. They haven't really been rewarded with any kind of cool stuff yet. So I think in that box will be a few things. And what I'm going to seed in there as well is an old brass key that looks like it comes from an ice mine somewhere in the Terrasphere. That's those frozen mines of the dwarves. It's just a seed. It's got no value. I might not even remember to do it, but it is definitely something that I'm going to do. And we'll see how far that goes. So next session, I can pretty much guarantee it's the round out of that combat. I can probably say that's going to last for another half hour or so. Then it's the interrogation of El-Qasim. That's another half hour. So then I'm left with an hour and a half to basically figure out what's going on. They might go shopping for equipment. Maybe that's a possibility. They're going to get back to that Skywell because they're using that now as their main mode of transportation, and then they're going to decide on where to go. Now, I'm not going to throw in any more combats for that particular adventure. It gets too heavy after a while, and they have a wedding to plan, which I think is awfully wonderful. I did, by the way, just so that you can see what's happening completely behind the scenes, I did write a message to Dave after the game, and I said, listen, if you want this bride thing to carry on, let me know. If you wanted to stop, let me know as well. And Leslie I will find a reason for her to suddenly go, ha, you're not worthy of being my husband. This is off. And then leave. So I could have done that very easily. I wrote to him and I said, is this the case? He said, you know what? He's absolutely fine playing it. He's very happy to see where it goes. So there we go. If he'd come back, it would have been no difficulty whatsoever to simply cut it, and have her leave. Very, very, very easy. So I think that pretty much sums up this episode. There wasn't a lot going on from a mechanical perspective. From a plot perspective, if we only still had the 12 episodes, I would now be trying to figure out how to link what happens next with our next plot point. But because we've got some leeway, I now know next episode can be fairly relaxed in terms of what we need to plan. Will they get to the temple by that time? No, I don't think so. I think they're going to spend an hour solving this thing, and then they easily could spend an hour deciding on where to go. If they do go straight down into the Underdark, into the Undersphere, if they go all the way down there, then they're going to encounter some drop goblins. I think that could be quite a lot of fun, very amusing opportunity. The goblins are all going to have 1 hit point. They're really not going to be tough, but they're going to drop down, set things on fire, that kind of thing. I think that would be interesting. Vankus has now got his lady. I now need to start working on Jenks. And as you pointed out, Jenks has been very reserved, very quiet. And I'm not sure on her role-playing experience, Lauren's role-playing experience, her actual role-playing experience. I think she has a lot of it. She certainly does cool stuff, like running up the axe of the ogre and sort of pounding on it. I think there's just a lot of very loud people, and I do try to go to her when I can. Something that you may have noticed, and this is no aspersions being cast on anyone, Jacob gets very excited when he's role-playing, so he tends to try and describe a lot of actions in sequence. And especially in this episode, I say, right, well, that's what you're going to be doing when I get to you, but first I've got to go to Jenks. So that's table management 101, is you've got to make sure that you work through each of the players to make sure that they get a moment to talk, even if it is to find a bean sack that she's going to try and wear. I did try and get a female bond going, not that doesn't matter on the sex actually, but I was trying to get a bond between Leslie and Jenks, where Leslie was going to show her some makeover tips on how to wear a bean sack better, but she didn't want that, so Leslie backed off. She wasn't going to force it upon anybody. I'm not going to not try again. Jenks needs to be brought out a little bit into the limelight, and I think that is going to happen. I think it's going to emerge over time. I'm not too phased by it. Like I said, we've got lots of big personalities already running around doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. The Barnabas-Draxus relationship is fantastic. The antagonism between the two of them is wonderful. They're going to play off of that. Vankus, of course, has now got Leslie. The donkey's been thrown into the mix. Valentin has got this glowing thing in his chest, so there's already stuff there. So I need to give Jenks something to play with, something to work off of. And I don't want to give her the Aknam Kasim, who is the Bolovian Skywill pilot. I don't want to make him a romance for her because we've got a romance already happening between Vankus and Leslie. So we don't really need to play with that anymore. Perseverance is our theme, so maybe Perseverance can inspire us to come up with something. She's on the run. She's got this past that we need to explore a little bit more as well. I need to get some more information out of her. It will happen. It will happen in time. I'm not rushing into it. I don't think we need to necessarily. If you've got 5 players and they're all being very loud and they're all dominating the screen, that then really does slow down the actions quite a bit as everyone tries to do these amazing things. As it is, I think we've got some very strong personalities expressed. Vankus in combat, we know, turns into a spider or something, and he goes off and does his thing in the corner. Barnabas is heroic. Valentin is just deadly. Draxus is an unknown factor in combat, a really unseen servant rather than attacking. It's a wonderful character play, not a tactical play, and that's what I really appreciate about Michael as a player. It's a wonderful, wonderful character play. And that's why I also try to pull a little bit of pressure off of him, so as not to punish him for stepping outside of that space. Yes, it was foolish to do in the middle of combat, but at the same time, oh, so sweet and so in character for that particular character. I really enjoyed that. Those are my thoughts on episode 4. What are your thoughts? How do you feel it went? Did you have solutions that maybe I missed completely? Did you have an outcome that would have been better? Did you notice something that I did completely wrong? Please bring it up down below and let's discuss and unpack so we can all learn from this and go from there. And yes, if this is something that you like, let me know so we can carry on doing more of them. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the happiest of gaming.